If you've ever felt like you're drowning in tasks and responsibilities, you're not alone. Don't worry, I'm going to give you some life-changing tips. Did you know that the key to productivity isn't just about doing more? It's about doing the right thing in the right way. Stick around to discover how you can transform your life using some basic strategies. The very first thing that you need to do is to understand what overwhelm is. It's not just about what's in your plate, it's actually the feeling of being paralyzed by it all. When your brain is bombarded with too many tasks, it goes on overdrive, and then ironically, it will shut down. But here's the good news. You can rewire your brain to handle more tasks effectively. Let's start with strategy number 1 to prioritize tasks. Not every task is created equal. I like to use the Eisenhower box method. It divides tasks into 4 categories: urgent and important, important but not urgent, urgent but not important, or neither urgent nor important. Let's take a look on how to apply this in real life. A lot of people struggle with how do I figure out what's important, what's not important, what's urgent? I think a lot of us kind of go on the feeling and less on actually sitting down and really seeing what is and what isn't. So here are a couple of questions that you can ask yourself if it's urgent. You want to ask yourself, does this task have a deadline that is fast approaching? Or will there be an immediate consequence if this task is not completed soon? You may want to ask yourself, is this something that requires immediate attention? If the answer is yes to all of these, then the task is likely urgent. Now let's go ahead and see if it's important. So if it's important, you would ask yourself, does this task align with my long-term goals and values? So you're going to have to really take a look first at what your goals and values are before you even do that. Because if you don't have any goals or values or anything like that outlined, it's probably the reason why you have a very hard time prioritizing, because there is no area that you're focusing on. There is no area that is of importance right now in this season. So really kind of taking that step back to see, what are my goals? What are my values? So that's the question you would ask. Does this task align with my long-term goals and values? Then the next question you would ask yourself is, will completing this task have a significant impact in my life or work? You would then ask yourself, is this task essential for my personal or professional growth? If the answer is yes to these questions, the task is likely important. Now, if you answered those questions, maybe one is important but not urgent, then that's when you'll know, okay, that goes into that quadrant. If you answered no to any of those questions for both the urgent and the important, then it is not important and not urgent. So urgent and important tasks, these are tasks that are both time sensitive and crucial for your long-term objectives. They often involve dealing with crises, meeting tight deadlines, or handling pressing problems. As opposed to important but not urgent, these tasks are important to your professional and personal growth, but do not have an immediate deadline. They include activities like planning, relationship building, self-improvement. Urgent but not important tasks, these tasks require immediate attention, but don't necessarily contribute to your long-term goals. They often involve handling other people's priorities, like certain emails or phone calls. Usually this is where we tend to try to figure out if we can delegate in this area. And then neither urgent nor important. These are tasks that are neither time sensitive, nor do they contribute to your long-term goals. And they're often distractions or busy work. This is like internet scrolling, over researching, things like that, as opposed to actually planning and researching with a goal in mind, right? So remember, what is urgent is often apparent due to external pressures. And while what is important is more subjective and requires a reflection on both your professional and personal priorities. I want you to just kind of think about what's important to you, what needs to get done in order for you to get other tasks done, and use this quadrant to prioritize the tasks, especially if you have a hard time figuring out, what should I be doing today? What should I be focusing on? The second thing that you will need to do to lessen overwhelm is to break down big tasks into smaller ones. So if you're feeling overwhelmed like a massive project, break it down, divide it into smaller, more manageable tasks. this approach makes it so much easier and less daunting. I also think like we're always approaching like a big task, even like laundry. Sometimes I'll get so stuck and like, oh, I have to do the laundry. And I'm so stuck on just the big picture that I forget, oh, okay, the very first thing that I could do, or even something that I could do in the morning if I feel like I'm in a rush or don't have a lot of time, is maybe I am just going to separate the clothes. I'm just going to separate that so that when I am ready and have time to do the laundry, then it becomes a lot less overwhelming because you're kind of chipping away at it in smaller pieces, as opposed to feeling, again, big picture and you're struggling to even start that particular task. One of the tools that I use to help me break down things is called Goblin Tools, and I'll kind of put a little demonstration here if you're watching the video version of this. But Goblin Tools is so cool. They have a mobile version and a desktop version, so you could just ask it to break it down from level of spiciness, meaning like maybe you really do need a very like large breakdown of tasks. So if you do need a very like the smaller the task, the easier it is for you to get it done, that you can kind of change the level here to break it down even further. Or if you just like, I just like 3 or 4 steps, that makes it a lot easier than one big step that I'm overwhelmed. So this is a great tool to use if you don't know how to break down tasks. Another strategy that you could use, that a lot of people, very underrated strategy, is to reduce distractions. Distractions are productivity's worst enemy. It's crucial to create an environment that helps you focus. Start by decluttering your workspace, then tackle digital distractions. If you right now have a desktop with so many files, tackle that, organize that. For me, because sometimes I'll download something and I'll put it immediately in my desktop because I know I'm going to use it that day. At the end of the day, I will grab all of the stuff that I downloaded to my desktop and I'll put it in a sort folder. And then on my weekly check-in at the end of the week, I look at the sort folder. What do I need to do with it? Do I need to put it on Google Drive to save it for later? Do I just only need it for that one task? Now I could throw it in the trash. Do something like that that can make it easier, because sometimes I feel like that could be overwhelming in that. Like our digital space can be super overwhelming as much as our physical space can be overwhelming. You could be amazed how much just like even just turning off our notifications, putting our focus modes. If you are a Apple user, putting focus modes for different things. Like I have a focus mode for work. I have a focus mode for when I don't want any distractions. And then you could even tailor it to silence certain phone calls. So I know when I'm at work, the only phone calls that I get through are my work calls. And then like my husband and my mom, maybe those are the only ones that in case of an emergency, those would probably be the 2 people that will call me. And so I'll always receive their calls, but everybody else, I won't receive notifications. I won't receive when I get a message, because I'll do that during my breaks when I have the time, so that I'm less overwhelmed. Because what I would find myself doing is I would be on a task and then I would get distracted because I wanted to answer a text message. At least for me, like when I receive a text message or even an email, like I want to respond naturally, like I want to just get that done. But then that kind of stops me from really focusing on the task that I am doing. So definitely use those focus modes. There is also an app that I use called the Freedom app. And the really cool thing about the Freedom app is that you can actually schedule times to focus, and it will block out certain apps. So I've had it block out my email, because one thing I would do is I wouldn't have the Gmail or the email app, but I would then go on Safari and type out gmail.com, and then I would look at my email. So this blocks that as well. It'll block certain websites as well on my phone, so that I'm not tempted to look into it. And truthfully, I'm sure there's a way that you can override it and stuff, but at that point I have a problem, right? At that point we need to really check and probably do like digital detox in order for us to not feel like we have to like look at stuff, right? So even then I will schedule times. Like for me, I schedule times from 6 a.m. to I want to say 8 a.m. when I wake up to do my workout or do my journaling and stuff, and I will not do anything related to my phone or like social media in those times. Like I still use my phone for my workouts or for listening to a podcast, but I don't use it for other things. So it's blocked. Those apps are blocked between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. So you could use this tool to help you reduce those kind of distractions. I know that there's another app and I can't remember quite what it is, but I'll put it right here when I'm editing, and I'll also put it on the description. It will audit what websites you tend to spend the most time, and at the end you'll see a reflection of like, this is how much time you're spending on Instagram on the desktop, or this is how much you're spending on ClickUp, or this is how much time you're spending on YouTube. And I think it's really helpful to kind of understand like our data and like why do we gravitate towards certain things. Like if I'm spending time on YouTube, is it because I was researching, or is it really because I was just consuming more than actually doing work? So that's something too that you could do to just really figure out what area in your life or what distractions are coming up that you may need to put some habits in place in order to reduce the impact it does to your productivity, to your work progress, to this feeling of overwhelm. I think we forget that distractions are such a big deal when it comes to like, I feel like distractions, we're very vulnerable to distractions when we're overwhelmed because we're going to procrastinate, right? Because maybe a task is too big. So just keep that in mind. Now, the most effective thing to do when it comes to feeling less overwhelmed is to plan effectively. I think a lot of us get maybe either overcomplicate planning or really just get overwhelmed with the whole thing. But I think if we take some dedicated time at the beginning of the month, at the beginning of the week, whatever feels right for you, you don't have to do weekly planning. For me, I personally enjoy weekly planning. But what I did is I created a draft plan of my weekly schedule, kind of like a skeleton. And you could do this on Google Calendar. You could do this on just a piece of paper and put Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then write down like from 6 to 9, like I know that I want to do my morning routine. From this to this, I know that I have work. So you'll basically categorize, and maybe you start first with doing a list of your non-negotiables and negotiables, right? So your non-negotiables these are things that need to get done. Like for me, non-negotiable is work, right? Like I have to see my clients. I have certain blocks where I have client sessions. And so I can't really set a meeting there or do a workout there because those are non-negotiable. I have to do my work. I have to see my clients on that time. So I want you to put all of your non-negotiables and then your negotiables. So negotiables for me are workouts, or when I schedule my workouts. They don't necessarily have to be in the morning, but maybe my ideal schedule is to do them in the morning. So I will put a time block to do it in the morning, but then I will also be mindful that's not always going to be the case, that I may have to do it in the afternoon. I'll just find time within the space that I have margin in to do it. A non-negotiable can be work we have to do in order to sustain our life. A negotiable could be, again, like I said, like when we need to clean, there are going to be some things that are negotiable that we have more control. I personally do everything in Google Calendar. And what I did is I created different calendars for important areas of my life. And so you could do that as well. Like create a calendar for just like socializing, create a calendar for like routines and schedules, and then create a calendar for important appointments. And like you kind of have those areas already outlined so that you know you're setting up time. So create a skeleton schedule. I'll kind of show you an example of what mine looks like right here. This is just mine and what works for me. How I started is I first just put my non-negotiables in there, which is like my work. That was easy to put. And then everything else that I have more control. I'm also aware that a lot of us here are people who work 8 to 5 and also have kids and have other responsibilities. And so it's also really hard sometimes what we can control in terms of our schedule. So one of the things that I love to tell my clients is to have variations of their routines to stay on track. So here's an example of like a variation for like movement workouts. I would love for you to create variations based on your emotional energy, or even you could put both emotional and physical energy. So for me, low energy may mean taking a 10-minute walk, doing a stretch, but like normal energy for me is doing my 20-minute workout, my strength workout, and 30 minutes of walking. And then high energy for me would be going to a workout class, because that requires for me to get ready, pack my gym bag, and then drive to the class. So that's a lot of high energy for me. So I want you to think like for you, what are different variations of the things and habits that you want to do? So example, you could do this for cleaning. So like what's your normal, like your normal pace that you could do this when you're just feeling neutral, feeling okay, like you have more control over your schedule. So yeah, think about the different habits and routines and have different variations for your morning routine based on your energy levels. Again, you could do this for a cleaning routine. You could do this for your morning routine, your self-care routine, and just having different areas in your life that have different variations, because life has so many different variations, unexpected outcomes that we don't always control. And so it's important when we're trying to give ourselves grace and compassion, but still also not give ourselves too much grace and still show up. The one thing that you need to get from this video is that if you could just practice doing something instead of nothing. Like, I once had someone say, like, no, I want to do I want to walk for an hour. Like, I want to get on the treadmill and walk for an hour. But I find myself with too many things to do in the morning. So, and I don't know how do I plan this 1 hour thing? And I'm like, well, what if you just did 15 minutes? And they're like, no, that's not enough. That's not going to make a big difference. And I'm like, well, your idea of an ideal schedule of 1 hour of walking, you're not doing that. You're not staying consistent. Maybe you're doing that once a week. And yet the 15-minute one, you might be able to do that more consistently and still show up, and you're gonna see results. Maybe not immediately. I think we're so pressed to have immediate results that we forget that over time, if we just keep at it, will feel so much better. I want you to focus more on progress and less on outcomes when it comes to your habits and routines. Consistency is in frequency. It's not the amount of times that we do it. It's the quality of how, when we show up, we are showing up for ourselves. So I hope that is helpful for you. But yeah, just make different variations based on your energy level. That is going to help you. Now, I am going to share some real life subscriber examples where I ask you guys, if you're having a problem in a certain area and I'm doing a video dedicated to that, you can share your problem and I'm going to give you some feedback on what you can do. And remember, even though I'm a therapist, I'm not your therapist. So you always want to make sure that you are talking to someone to support you through this, so I could be more tailored to your situation, since I only know a little bit about your situation. Let me give you this subscriber's example. So the subscriber said that what overwhelms her is balancing work, friendships, romantic relationships, events, school. It's hard for me to give each area attention equally. I feel like I'm all in with one area and neglecting the others. Oh, I like this one because I feel like a lot of us feel that way, where there's so many different areas in our lives that we don't always have control over. And sometimes there are going to be different seasons where you are going to pay more attention. And I think that is the key, to recognize that it's normal and okay to have what I like to call intentional imbalance. It's totally okay to see this in terms of seasons. So here are some tangible strategies to help you in this area. So again, the very first thing is that you're going to want to accept and embrace seasons of imbalance. Because here's the thing, the way I see it, if you're giving everything, let's just say you're balanced, right? You're giving everything equal amount of energy and effort and everything, then you're never excelling in any area. Like, you're never over exceeding any area. Everything just feels neutral and blah, and you're not really getting everything together. Like you're not winning in certain areas. Here's the thing, we don't have energy, like equals amount of energy throughout our days, throughout our weeks. Things happen, problems happen. We have external circumstances that will make certain seasons difficult for us. So for us to think that we can give everything an equal amount of time is not a realistic expectation. So if we just say, this season, I'm going to have intentional imbalance in this area. Now, it is good to just try to figure out, okay, maybe you're always neglecting friendships and you're finding that you're always sad about not having friends, then maybe that's like an area where you may want to focus on. And I would even say, why are some areas easier to focus on than others? I'll share this with you. Whenever I was overachiever, perfectionist, I would always gravitate towards work because it was an area that I could control, as opposed to friendships where it requires other people, requires effort, it requires, and maybe I wasn't receiving what I needed from friendships, and also wasn't able to have conversations and set boundaries and say what I needed in relationships. That's when I knew I would put it in the back burner because it was a lot to handle in the moment for me in emotional energy wise. So I would neglect it. And so if you're like me, anything like me, where maybe there's one area where you feel super confident in and focusing in, but the other area is neglected for that reason because it may require a little bit more work, then dedicate the next season of your life. And you could look at seasons as actual seasons, like during the fall, during the spring, this is where I focus on. Or you could use the quarters to dedicate your season, or you could use the month. This month I'm gonna focus on this, whatever it is that works for you. But focusing on seasons, understanding that there are times when certain areas of your life will require more attention. For example, when we have, like, I know certain industries as far as work may have heavier like work time. So for me, that's usually the beginning of the year, January, but I end up having slower seasons in July. So I'll start in July and June. I may dedicate more time to family, friends, and traveling and things like that because it makes sense for me. In December, I may slow down because, again, holidays and things like that. And my clients aren't setting as many appointments. So I want you to think of that. Like, there are going to be seasons where whether you're in this, like if you're in school and you have finals and things like that, that's probably going to be where you're not going out a lot and having friend time and maybe going workouts consistently and things like that. And that's totally okay. That's why the energy variation of habits and routines is going to help you so that you're still showing up, you feel good about yourself, but you're not doing so much that's overwhelming you and feel like you're neglecting, right? You're still kind of showing up in a way that helps maintain, like you're on maintenance mode, but you're not on neglecting mode. So we want to be on maintenance mode, not neglecting mode. And something else too is to just reflect on your priorities periodically. Like I said, we could do this monthly, quarterly, seasonally, however you want to see it, but really do reflect on your priorities and just kind of take a step back and say, okay, what's happening? What am I not prioritizing? Let me see what friends and family are saying. Maybe they need this from me and maybe I do want to provide this for them, but I'm in a season of like heavy workload or whatever the case is. And then, plan accordingly. Another advice that I would give would be to integrate different areas of your life. So combining activities when it's possible, find ways to integrate different aspects of your life. For example, for me, a huge thing I'm prioritizing is fitness and movement. And so, but also I want to make new friends. And so what I'm doing is I'm prioritizing trying to make certain activities with friends, active activities. So I'll invite a friend to a workout class, and then after we can go to brunch or we can have coffee. So I'm able to compromise with a friend as far as like what they like, but I also want them to do things that I enjoy. And sometimes it's also easier too to find friends who are also aligned with those interests, that it makes it so much easier. You don't feel like you're neglecting it, either making relationships or, sustaining your habits and things like that. So I think that is a perfect way. Try to figure out how you can integrate different areas of your life. And then when you reflect on your season and where you're at, you want to prioritize and set clear goals. Like, not everything can be a top priority. So determine what is most important in the short and long term, and you align your efforts accordingly. And then you will want to use the time management tools that I explained. So calendar blocking, allocate specific blocks of time for different activities. So if and maybe you pick 3 areas. So this could be personal, work related, and then just social. And so you would put these blocks on your calendar. So I know for personal, it's always going to be in the morning. For social, it's always going to be the first Friday of the month and the last Friday of the month, where you're always going to schedule something with friends, and you just have it blocked there, because then if anybody asks you to do something or something like work related or something, you're like, no, I'm sorry, I have this going on. But again, based on your season, especially if that's what you're prioritizing. And again, communicate with also friends of what season you're in. So communicate with friends and family when you're busy and you're having like long, heavy seasons. I know friends have communicated with me. Like I have several friends who are currently pregnant and they're prioritizing, that season in their life. And so I may need to do a little more with asking them to do things, and they might decline more because they have appointments or things going on, right? Or they're not feeling well. And that is totally okay. But as long as they communicate, right, what's happening within our relationship and what they can and can not do, then I think that's really great. So same thing for you. If you want to communicate where you're at in season, maybe you're prioritizing this. And again, I know not everyone's going to make it a safe space for you to do so. So try to focus on the people who will give it a safe space for you to communicate these boundaries and limits that you have and what you're prioritizing. And then it's something that I think everybody just should know as a rule of thumb is to be flexible and adaptable. Be ready to adjust your plans as circumstances change. That's why I love having the low, normal, high energy, because if things do change, maybe you scheduled a workout class that day and it was high energy and you're like, I cannot do this, I'm overwhelmed, then we lean on the low energy. And you can even have a like slump energy. Like this is like when I'm in my slump mode, this is what I'm doing, and that might be nothing. That might be you're giving yourself grace, and that's okay. Let's move on to subscriber number 2. They said, for me, it's staying calm when I fall behind on my routine. Life happens and every day doesn't have to be listed out and perfect. So I would like to hear about emotional balance when being productive. So I think we talked about this, right? So we want to embrace flexibility in your routines, creating variable routines, developing variations of your routine for different scenarios, a short morning routine for busy days. This prepares you for days when following your regular routine isn't feasible. And so we're focusing on progress, not perfection, right? Again, I don't know the specifics on what happens when you fall out of your routine, but even just creating that variation of that one routine that you have to different buckets so that you're still showing up. The whole point is not to not show up at all. There's going to be times where there is nothing you can do and you cannot show up, but at least here we're putting margin when it's more of an emotional thing. Like I emotionally feel like I can't do this high energy or my normal routine. I can at least do my low energy routine, whether that's doing a workout at home, whether that is like getting something like fast food instead of cooking a healthy meal. Like it is okay if we have to do that, especially if we can't do a regular routine. But then we have a plan of like, okay, we're basing it on our energy. We're not using this like, oh, it's just going to be low energy today, low energy tomorrow. Like, no, it's just only low energy today. And then tomorrow we're going to check our energy. So we're checking it day to day as opposed to planning like, oh, this is just going to be a low energy week. And then you want to plan for interruptions that will happen. So having a contingency plan, like what happens if like life happens and you can't do the specific things that you set your mind to. Having a contingency plan is just so much better, because it's like you're going to tell yourself rationally, your brain's going to determine like, oh, okay, like we still have our shit together. We're still doing the things that we need to do or get done. We still plan ahead. And so this is helpful. That could look like meal planning. That could look like a lot of different things. But this is how you emotionally balance, because you kind of have to trick your brain to think like, I'm here for you. I love you. Like it's okay if we are not always on top of our routine. Like even though our brain is going to react to the emotional side, right? It's going to be like, oh, this sucks. Like I may not get to my progress or whatever it is, but you kind of have to counteract it with that positive affirmations, positive reinforcement, saying like, you will get back on track, right? And be so like honest with yourself, and just remember like who you are. If you're someone who's always shows up for yourself, and maybe this is just a season that you're not, remind yourself, I am that girl. I am that girl that shows up for her life. And this is just a season. This is just a slump, and it's totally okay. You have to kill yourself with kindness. You have to give yourself compassion and practice acceptance and mindfulness, especially when you are trying to stay calm and centered. So this is putting more mindfulness practices into your day, like deep breathing or just writing affirmations. Like those are some things that are mindful and present, or practicing gratitude. And also focus on what you can control. I talked a lot about this, but a lot of us forget that there are two things, right? We have to distinguish between control and influence. Control is, these are aspects that are entirely within your personal boundary, your actions, your decisions, your attitudes, all fall into this category. So focusing on these elements empower you to take charge of part of any situation. When you focus on what you can control, you're empowering yourself. Now, when you know what you influence, this includes areas where your actions can have an impact, but they don't guarantee a specific outcome. So you can always sway or affect these areas, but they ultimately involve others, people's decisions, and external circumstances, right? Example, control. I can control when I show up to my workout, but I may not control where my body decides it wants to grow muscle, lose weight, again, to a certain extent, because again, there's genetics, there's body composition, there's so many things that will affect your outcome, right? And so like food sensitivity, like there's going to be so many things that affect your outcome, but we can influence it, right? By being in the right nutritional plan, by being in the right workout plan that works for our body. So again, I want you to focus on that. And same thing, control and influence, whether that is like I can control when I'm available for certain people, but I can influence people to hang out with me, but I can't necessarily like make them hang out with me on certain times and days. Like I love that I can influence people. Let's just, I'll always, like when I want to make a plan with a friend, I'll say, hey, like, would you want to go here, right? So I'm already influencing the idea, like, let's go here. But I don't control if they're going to say yes or no, but I'm at least putting it out there and have a little bit of the control by, you know, suggesting a place that I feel comfortable with. And so that's how I would feel you should focus on when you're trying to kind of create that emotional balance within yourself. And again, prioritize compassion, really develop emotional resilience. So engage in activities that build resilience. Again, this is like journaling, talking to supportive friends, or engaging in hobbies that you enjoy. It is okay when we fall out of a routine, but it's also okay that we want to be at a certain level and we want to be people who show up for ourselves, right? Like there's nothing wrong with wanting to be consistent. It's when that consistency becomes too rigid where it just doesn't make us feel good. Remember, these are all things that should benefit you, right? Not make you feel bad about yourself. There's this Jessica Massey, who is the creator of the Hustle Sanely planner. She always says this, and she says like our schedules and routines are tools, not chains. And that has always resonated with me because anytime I have like use a tool or something, and if I'm being too rigid or restrictive or whatever, I ask myself, is this tool like chaining me, or is this tool actually giving me the like what I need from it? Like it's actually helping me. And if it's not, then we just have to adapt how we see that tool, right? How we use that tool. So I hope that is helpful. Now, this third subscriber says, when I'm stressed or overwhelmed in one area of life, it sometimes makes me shut down and feel like I can't give to those other areas until I figure it out in the stressful area first. I totally get that. Like when we're stressed out, it's so hard. Like our brain automatically wants to focus on getting out of the stress cycle as opposed to trying to move on. Like you're not going to be able to move on if there is a huge, they like to see it, if there was like a huge boulder in front of you and you need to get to the other side, you're not going to move on until you move that boulder, right? And so I completely get this, but this is not always necessarily the case with most things. Like we don't always have a huge boulder. It just feels that way. Our brain makes us feel like we have this huge boulder we can't move. So a huge thing is to prioritize and break down those tasks. So when overwhelmed, identify the most critical tasks in the stressful area that you're talking about. And then you ask yourself what needs to be done first, and then what is causing the most stress, just to kind of have an idea of tackling it. You can practice mindful, I can't say this word, compartmentalization. Putting things in buckets is having like maybe using physical cues to help you compartmentalize these things. This could be as simple as closing a folder related to your stressful task, rearranging your workspace, or challenging your physical environment to signal a shift in focus. So for me, sometimes like when I'm stressed at work and I know like I already have like a hard stop at 3 p.m. or at 7 p.m., I will change my clothes for the day so that I know, hey, we're not in work clothes. Like we need to physically change our mindset, and then maybe I'll put on a TV show, or maybe then I'll read, just try to find a way to kind of move on to the next thing, because the stressor is going to be there, especially if there are things, again, focusing on the control versus influence. What do I control versus what I can influence? I think that's helped me so much when we can look at a stressful situation or area and say, okay, I'm doing everything that I can control. I'm doing everything that I can control. I can only influence so much at that point. Like it's on someone else's hands, and I need to get the rest that I need to move forward. And that's another thing. Like when we're feeling overwhelmed, killing it with self-care is so important. Important to get yourself just your basic needs: food, water, sleep, all of these things that are going to be so integral for you to have a restful day so that you're able to tackle the stressors the next thing. So I think it's okay to have to take a pause and focus on the stressful thing. But when you find yourself that you're like paralyzed by the stress and you feel like you can't move on forward, then I think it is time for you to seek professional help, especially if you're finding you're stuck in this cycle for months on it. Because at that point, I think you're burnt out, and I think that you're like, it's too much for you to handle at that point, and you lost track of like where you need to move to. So I hope that makes sense, because at some point we get to a point where our bodies are just acting on the fight, and our nervous system is just so stressed that we feel like we can't move forward. And often it means that we kind of have to backtrack, see where we are putting so much stress and overwhelm that's unnecessary. And so that sometimes can feel like having a support person, or again, if you don't have access to that, just sitting down, reflecting, and thinking about, why am I always stressed in this area? Right? Like, what is happening? This could be, for most people, I find that this is like finances. Sometimes this could be work situations that feel like there's nothing you can do. So in that, I would start working on proactively figuring out the finance part. And then also proactively figuring out, okay, if my work situation isn't going to change, how can I leave this job? How can I make this more bearable for myself? Like that point, we have to create a stronger action plan that we can follow. So I would see what area is always coming up for you. Finances, work, exercise, whatever it is. What are areas in your life, or like health, what areas in your life that are just always coming up and they never let you move on to other areas, and that's where you're feeling always stuck in the stress cycle. I hope this was helpful and that you guys enjoyed this. If you love videos like this, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, and make sure that you're looking at the community page if you want to share your own story and you want some feedback from me. I hope to see you guys in my next video. Talk to you soon.